Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Finance on the dock with
Welcome.
a good Italian cup of espresso.
And this
Italy.
is actually called
It is cold,
Italian espresso.
which Italian will hate, by the way. You know, when you order a coffee in Italy, you shot it, right, and you're done. But by the way, we are drinking the real deal.
I mean, it's an Italian.
It's called Illy. It's from Trieste. It's the best espresso in the world. ILLY. People don't think it's Italian, but it is.
We're drinking Italy.
And that's the Ferrari of coffee. I actually needed a good cup of coffee because I actually kind of woke up in a bit grumpy. Been in a
You
bad
woke
mood.
up pissy this morning. All like negative.
Well-
I pick him up and all of a sudden I'm like, what's going on? You're like the most positive guy I know.
I thought you were like aggressive with me this morning. We were asking the wrong question about markets and
Yeah, I said, what are we going to talk about today? And I said a few things and he was just like, I don't like it. I was like, what is going on?
I don't wanna do it.
What the heck is going on? What happened?
I made a bad choice last night. Before I turned off the light in bed, I read the IMF market forecast.
Which a lot of people do. A lot of people read that before they go to bed.
Sure. And looking at analysis, at conflict numbers, at oil prices, a lot of bads. And I looked at the scenarios that the IMF, International Monetary Fund, just came out with based on the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel and Palestine. It looks shitty. It looks scary.
So what scenarios were they?
Look, they were talking about the ongoing scenario, which is crude oil. It's higher, $6-7 higher than before the conflict.
We like
in-
low 90s now?
I think it's 92, 91, 92
Yeah,
this
somewhere
morning. So we already are in that scenario, which means between 500,000 to 1.5 million barrels have been removed from the market. High volatility, cost of living is higher, cost of food is going to stay high. Volatility is bad news for everybody. And then move quickly to second scenario. That's where the pissy Andrea happened.
It got worse?
It got freaking worse.
That was the good scenario?
That was the good scenario. This is where we are right now, guys. Okay.
We're positive people.
and we're
by the way,
positive. We're here to
okay?
tell you what we see, and we try to interpret bad to do better.
So what was the second scenario?
Second scenario compared to the war in Iraq, okay, which means 2 to 5 million barrels a day might be removed from the market if there is an escalation of the conflict in the Middle East. It's a timber box right now, right?
That much oil removed from the market?
That is if something bad happens. If like
It seems like there's a really good chance of
there's a good chance, right? There is a rogue player that wants this instability to last longer because that's how they profit. This is how this rogue regime
Volatility. They
right?
want volatility.
They want instability. They want unpredictability,
Yeah.
and that affects us. So that's why I was pissy, and I was pissy because I thought these rogue fuckers, oligarchs, are the one that are screwing with my night. So the silver lining there is, read the self-help book, read a novel, read positive stuff. at night.
Anything positive before going to bed.
Absolutely, because
Not the IMF. Once again,
not the
just,
IMF
that's just
report.
weird, but I respect it. I'm gonna though. You just said something. Oligarchs. I've got a question. Random question. Biggest oligarch in the world. Go.
Who do you think is the biggest oligarch in the world? Then I'll answer that question.
I don't know. It has to be. I would actually make the argument that it's. And I know this isn't technically right, but Putin.
Putin is.
I know he's not really an oligarch, but
That's a powerful oligarch, right?
you know.
So that you know, oligarchs, by the way, it's a word that has been studied by Aristotle, like over 2,000 years ago. So it's an old
Aristotle,
word,
really?
right? Absolutely. It's basically people that control wealth, and they use wealth to get more influence, more power, and
Oh, so it's using the money to get political gain.
correct. So the oligarch you're talking about is somebody that leverages political might to get wealth.
More like a dictator. So Putin.
Putin basically is a billionaire with nuclear weapons.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
What's my biggest oligarch when I think about oligarchs? Elon Musk. Elon Musk became. Elon Musk.
What?
Hear me out. Hear me out.
Okay. First, we
And-
start with the IMF, and now we're going to. Okay, go.
Elon Musk, and I like a lot of things that Elon Musk does. Elon Musk became an oligarch the moment he bought Twitter, because that gave him massive political tools to influence the market. So that's a billionaire with the political tools that he now has. So a lot of the information that comes out of Elon Musk's, it's actually not real, but that still moves the market. Think of Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo has 600 million followers on Instagram. Does he move the market? He does. Remember that spot? That was a good mistake he makes during an ad. He actually had a can of Coke in front of him, and he actually removed the can of Coke, like kind of almost rejecting that beverage. Coke stocks corrected that day, right? That's an example of how
That is quite an example.
how you move markets. So Elon Musk
But
is the
Elon
biggest.
Musk, huh? That
Yep.
is pretty interesting. Because I'm an American, so I always think of oligarch as like Russian oligarch.
Right, and these are they're
You
a
know,
good
but
bunch.
but I know it's just I didn't know the Aristotle thing, but that's very, very interesting. All right, moving on. So another interesting topic. 10-year Treasury hit 5% last week for a heartbeat. And it seemed to be a buying signal for the markets. We saw just a rush of buyers. Bill Ackman was very loud that he closed out one of his positions,
which is part of the strategy, right?
which
That's
is
part of
now
his
he's a
strategy.
marketer. And Bill Ackman is
Who's
an
Bill
interesting.
Ackman? Can you tell us? I'm a big fan too. I respect the.
I mean,
the
Bill.
guy.
You know more than I do about him, but Bill Ackman, Pershing Capital, he's been a big player for quite a while. He knows how to use the bullhorn to get a message out there and to use that to manipulate the markets in the way he wants. He makes a lot of big bets, very loud bets, and he's wrong a lot. Netflix,
Big.
right? He went in
Big
late
hit.
on Netflix when competition was booming. I think he lost 35% on that position.
350 million. Yeah.
350 million. I mean, whatever.
Pocket change. Pocket
Whatever.
change.
But he's right more than he's wrong over a 20, 30-year career.
I couldn't agree more. 100%. Does it have it wrong? Is this like
Yeah. So back to it. What do you think?
Is it a marketing stunt? I mean, remember, these guys are very visible. And I try also to have messages for you. If you are an entrepreneur, if you are a business, be visible, control the narrative, because that's also how you increase the value of your own company or your own self.
And you have more control.
100%. So I actually think that he might have it wrong. The reason why
So not peak yield. You
Not
think
peak yield.
long-term interest rates are going to go higher? is your
I
thinking.
think so. I think so. And
Okay.
you know, 6 months ago, you and I were having a cup of coffee, and we did not believe that we will get a 5%, and now we are.
I said 4.5.
Right.
So don't listen to me.
Right. And I actually said 7% is the peak housing interest rate.
Oh, I said
Where are we at today?
I said 7 too on the housing. We're at 8%.
We're at 8%.
I mean, we're right there. That's where the vast majority of your lenders are going to be. A lot of points are being paid. Points is just, so a point is 1% of your loan amount. So a $500,000 loan, $5,000 is a point. A lot of people bringing more money up front to get a lower rate locked in.
Break it down for me. Like, let's say I need a $500,000 mortgage.
Mhm.
How much am I gonna fork out this year extra? What's the premium I'm paying
Versus 2 years ago?
versus COVID, versus before COVID? I want people to get. This is important
Let's
because
say you were paying $2,300 with taxes, insurance, and I'm thinking Colorado, taxes and insurance. Taxes and insurance are going to vary a lot, but basically, so property taxes are approximately 30% higher than they were during COVID. Insurance rates are up approximately 40%, and with rates instead of being 3% interest rate being an 8%, I'd say you've gone from about $2,300 a month on a $500K purchase to about $4K a month. So that's 80% higher.
it's at 80% higher. The point I'm trying to make here, Matt, is
Still shocks me to say that.
we have to forget cheap money. We had.
Oh yeah, it was
we're
an
living-
aberration. It was an
We're
aberration.
living in a very different market, and we're all desperately trying to go back there.
Yeah.
But what if it doesn't happen? So that's what I'm trying
that's
to tell
fascinating.
Bill Ackman is like, what if we don't go back to the fundamental 2% inflation that the European and the U.S. really want?
Which is interesting because the Fed is still saying the cost of money, the neutral rate
Right.
for money, they've only moved it up a little
Sure.
over a long horizon, 10, 30 years, which is interesting to me because they're still being massively influenced by that, 2008 through a year ago.
Absolutely.
The cost of money was free.
money was free.
Basically. I remember I bought a house in 2018 and it was 4.75%, and my wife and I were appalled.
Yep.
You know, we're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible.
And
But
we locked it at 2.7%.
yeah, I mean, we refinanced because,
In
you know,
2017.
mortgage lender.
No,
But
no, absolutely. So I think it's whatever you want to call it. I think it's we need to assess what we've got. We need to think through the lenses of crisis management, because I think we are living in a potentially more unstable markets where there's more of these oligarchs. You can call it Elon Musk, you can call it Soros, you can call it Trump, Putin, Hamas. They all have a political interest and a financial interest, and it does affect the bread loaf, the bottle of wine, the gas at the pump,
Everything.
and the house that we're buying. So I think it's in this conversation we try to filter through thousands of pages of analysis to bring like actionable
applied
data points that can
analysis.
they can help them make a smarter decision, not better decision. There's good and bad in everything, but those are the decision we have absolute control over. Because I think often we are distracted by these analyses I read last night, which prevent us from then, getting back to work and be energized and focus on these.
It's such a and we're also influenced by those
absolutely.
moments. Yesterday I called a mentor of mine, Lou Barnes, and he was in the mortgage industry for about 55, 60 years.
He's like a Warren Buffett of real estate.
He actually used to be referenced constantly in the Wall Street Journal. They call him up a lot. Super smart guy. And I called him and I felt kind of pessimistic yesterday.
Well, 60 years of experience.
60 years of
That
experience.
is priceless, guys.
And I called him up and I just said, hey, housing market, Colorado, go. And he said, buy a house as soon as you can. And I was like, gosh, I'm a little more conflicted
With 8%.
than that. And with 8%. And he said, look, there's a housing stock problem. It's not going away. It's only going to get worse. The land is restricted. There's not going to be more land. There are not going to be more houses. Not enough for what we're seeing with an influx into Colorado. And he's like, get it now, because in 10 years you're going to look back. Now, if you're going to buy a house, if you're planning on moving in a year or two or selling it in a year or two, I don't care what he says. I wouldn't make a move. Probably, I wouldn't make a move right now.
Same.
But if you're looking at a long horizon, all investments, if you're looking 5, 6, 7, 10, 20-year horizons, just look at the asset and look at those underlying fundamentals and make your decision.
And I would say that applies to probably the broader Midwest. As reference to the housing.
Yeah.
Look, I think I go back to Buffett, classic that you and I both love. Like, don't bet against America. I got like hundreds of calls since the conflict started in Israel. See, this is how global economies are connected. I got calls from France, Italy, the UK, saying we want to buy a house
in the U.S.
In the U.S., in Colorado, in Kansas, in Georgia, because this is the safest. And by the way, we haven't talked much about this. This morning I was actually talking to CNN in the Middle East, and they asked me, what are you seeing that nobody's talking about? Capital flight. A lot of capital leaving not just the Middle East, Europe, towards America.
And where's the safety?
America, North America, Canada, and the US. So again,
that's fascinating.
We're comfortable talking about the discomfortable things, right? But this is a hot market. That's also why we see consumption high, I think. This is why we see people are continuing to be bullish. This is an interesting data point I saw this morning. Startup creation in the US since 2022 are skyrocketing. Women are starting business at an unprecedented...
That's consumer confidence.
That's consumer confidence.
Which is still high.
You have the technology, you have the AI, you have new tools that scare some people.
Yeah.
But that others are starting to adopt and bring in. So
Is that American optimism?
Look, I love what's happening in America today. 3 things come to mind: outsourcing, automating, and really, thinking macro manager instead of micromanagement. So there's massive delegations, automations, outsourcing. I love that. And so I think rather than maybe we can jump to the technology, because a lot of people are, particularly in Europe, are fearful. I look at Italy, which is banning Airbnb and Uber everywhere. There's a fear of technology taking away jobs. I think in the US and North America in general, we have let's be early adoption.
Yeah.
Let's see how it can be my reskilling and the reskilling of millions of people.
It's less protectionist in general.
100%.
You know, which is the opposite of, like a Donald. Like it's interesting to see the Republicans become more protectionist.
That is
That,
fascinating.
I mean, it's been fascinating to see. I mean, through history, I'm a history buff. Through history, the American parties they take turns taking sides. They flip flop constantly about who's protectionist, who isn't,
Right.
who's pro business, who isn't, who's pro immigrant, who isn't. It's really interesting to watch it right now, moving the Republicans so strongly into the protectionist camp. Especially, it's a form of populism, but
is.
especially looking at Donald Trump. And he said the other day he wants 10% tariffs on everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Which is I think Hamilton did that
Right.
back in the day.
Right.
But the idea is he wants to promote more diversity in manufacturing and reshoring in the U.S. What do you think about that?
Look, I think it's populism, right? It's populism on steroids. I think to some extent the U.S. and Europe and Canada have already reshored some of the critical manufacturing, the critical R&D, the critical. Let's regionalize. People don't know actually that the U.S. in October is pumping 13.6 million.
We're a net exporter.
13,600,000 barrel of oil a day, the largest producer in the
It's
world.
amazing, isn't it?
That's an example of how the U.S., since actually Obama took over, had become a net exporter of oil, and
Talk about a shift from 20
not,
years
not
ago.
needing to police the oil corridor to keep the the oil tanker safe. Say, let's do it at home. I think
Our
this is-
biggest issue is refining, like
Similarly-
refinery capacity.
100%. So I would say similarly, if you look at mineral critical metals, you'll see Americanizations of that industry where we want to be dependent on countries we have control over. We
Yeah.
have similar culture. We
Yeah.
have. So I'm not surprised by Trump's statement. I think the U.S. is producing a lot more than it was 10 years ago. Also because there is a lot more rogue players out there.
But economists are coming out and saying like, oh, that's, I mean, almost universally. Economists say that's insane. That is a massive tax on the American consumer. Anarchy for the economy if this happened. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. Look, I think we want to build better buffer. The reason why I'm saying 13,600,000 barrels a day. Look, the U.S. has increased its storage capacity so that if we need to unload 3 million additional barrels a day to bring prices down, to keep inflation down, we'll do that. 10 years ago, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I think
which is important to have strategic reserves so that when an election is right around the corner and you're president, you can release those reserves
You can
and drive
release
down
those-
energy prices at just the
Absolutely,
right
and
time.
win the right votes. So what has China done this week? They banned all exports of graphite. Graphite is a critical metal that goes
it's massive.
into the battery.
Batteries. Without it, I mean,
and-
some say you cannot. They've been trying to get around that, but it doesn't seem like they've been able to.
So that's
Correct
why
that nut.
I think it's important to think. Look, some of these politics are still going to be out there.
Yeah.
I think having more control on your supply chain, it's the biggest story after COVID, right? We don't want to be over dependent on
Supply chain shocks. Like, talk about lit the fire of inflation. in the United
Absolutely,
States.
absolutely, and it's not just politics. It's also climate shocks. It's natural disasters. So I think it's important that we regionalize as much as possible, and we de-risk our decision making by better understanding the costs of not doing some of these or pushing some of these policies. So I think, and this goes back to what your wife and my wife always tells us. So they say, just
Our wives are amazing, by the way. If you're watching this, we
they
love
are the
you.
best. They are the best.
They are.
And my wife often tells me, you got to learn from the Italians. They tell you before you open your mouth, shut up and listen.
I love that.
Which is like, if you're listening.
That is
you're
not how the
learning.
men in my family work, by the way.
Well,
We should, though.
No,
That's the smart point.
That's one of the first things you learn in Venice as you grow up, like in dialect, which is like prima di parlare tasi, which is like before you open your mouth, really shut up. and
yeah.
listen. And
Think before you talk.
think before you talk. Or others will say, you better shut up and make few people around you think that you're stupid than speaking up. and kind of proving it to everyone.
Oftentimes, the quietest person in the room is the most powerful and smartest person. I mean,
I love that movie. What was it? Frank Lucas, American Gangster.
oh, American Gangster.
American Gangster.
Classic.
Denzel Washington.
Such a good movie.
Amazing.
Love that movie.
Live lesson, right?
Love that movie.
He actually approaches his brother, who's like, he has a very loud
Suit on.
suit on, colorful.
It's like 70s.
And he-
70s.
Yeah, exactly. Tony Montana, like Scarface
Yeah,
type of. And he
yeah.
tells him the loudest person in the room is the weakest person in the room. I think that is applicable to negotiation, right? You negotiate with your client all the time, and sometimes the less you talk, right? You go Sicilian, as we say in Italy. You don't talk. You don't show your cards.
Yep. 100%.
That's scary, right? The person who doesn't talk often is the most prepared, the most
Yeah.
powerful. He doesn't say I, he says we, even when he's alone, right? Because that's part of the strategy
The
of
royal we, man.
that is very, very powerful. And it makes me think of a book called Never Split the Difference. It talks about, this is an FBI negotiator. He was in charge of terrorism.
I've heard of this book.
Yeah, he's amazing. And he says the scariest terrorist or kidnapper are these ones that are alone and they talk with we. Say, let me consult my team before I get back to you. These are the planners. These are the ones that don't reveal their strategy or their cards,
Yeah.
but they understand how to leverage the power of silence. And I would say, Matt, in a noisy time that we're living in, where everything is social, everything is shared, silence is an asset, right?
I guess we should leave it at that then. Silence is an asset.
We'll see you next week.
Take care, guys.
Ciao, ciao.
I thought that was great.
I thought it was spontaneous.
I think we're
Less-
actually getting better. as
less
we-
fluff, right?
I think we're
Less